it's in a direction where as though like I got in it when it was oversaturated, but also it's something in my mind that like sometimes I could feel deterred, not like I'm reaching my fullest potential, but also it's like, nigga, did you even show up today? Like, it's really just about showing up more than it is like, all right, bet, like, am I doing enough? Cause like to the public audience, I might never be enough because I might not have the numbers, but it's really about, did I show up? That's what I want for myself. Cause I never knew what consistency really was till I started streaming. It's like I don't want to show up for niggas every day, but then it's just like, well, that's really how you feel about yourself. Every day I didn't show up for myself every day. Every day, sometimes I imagine how further I would be if I was consistent. So it's the only thing like forcing me like really to be like, more consistent. You know what I'm saying? So I seen somebody on YouTube say like it was this professor at Yale. He going viral right now. He was talking about how the psyche works. He's like, if somebody took all your memories, right? If somebody took all your memories and you was once the greatest soccer football player by memory, and somebody just came and erased all your memories. Then when you went out on the field one day, you stepped out into the field, and somebody kicked you a ball, and you had no recollection of who you was, would you still be the greatest soccer player ever? And the answer to that question is yes, you would. And when I thought about that statement, that bold statement he said, I said, maybe I'm walking in a world where as though I have no recollection of who I actually am. But stepping in and streaming without numbers, without clip farming, do I remember who I am? The greatest. With no actual recollection of what it is that I did or who I was in my past life. And I think about it in today, this streaming direction, like a lot of people not gonna be it's a lot of people not gonna be here that was here today, here tomorrow, like when it comes to streaming. So I know with me, man, it's really like going through it and understanding what it really is. I'm ready. It's teaching me something every day.
Well, I'm gonna put some. So what I want us to do, man, is get a time, say, 8 o'clock every night or something.
Yeah.
And we just do it for an hour, and just record. I just want to record stuff, but not put it out there. Just record it and then decide what we're gonna do with it, and how we're gonna, you know, edit it or whatever we need to do. Or uh, yeah. Word.
Well, I agree, Doc, because I used
So
to do them streams for like an hour. Now I just do like 1 hour a day until I master my craft.
I want to put the person up and just kind of see how it looks and how it sounds and all that,
Mm-hmm.
and then oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuff tastes pretty good, huh?
Tastes like lemon pie. Real good.
All right,
And this is the most healthiest.
see, it's plant-based, and that's the thing. I don't do any meat thing.
Right. So and it's not and it's vegan. I'm gonna assume, right? Vitamin A, iron, vitamin D, thiamine, niacinamide, biotin, zinc. If I would have known about this formula that you've been using, I taurine?
It's like an amino acid. The only place you can get it from is meat. So that's why you got to take supplemental. Yeah, man. Put a couple of videos up. Get started.
I'm with you on that.
So
Yeah.
once I put my videos up, how people gonna find them?
Well, it's different ways to find the videos. Like, if you, we gotta, we can either do one or two things. We can make you. Wait, you don't got social medias, do you? Yeah, we gotta make you business pages, like business social media pages where it's just strictly content, all under the same email preferably. But like I said, Doc, money it's nothing money can't do literally but buy back time. Well, actually, I'm lying because with more money could buy you time. And money can do anything but bring back the dead. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have to go the ad revenue out. And when enough people see you and enough content gets out there, the videos are gonna start pushing itself whereas though we're not really gonna need the ad revenue to put ads on the videos. My whole thing is, Doc, you so organic. I wanna see the podcast series that you're gonna drop. Because I think those stories is what's gonna draw people in to like what you got going on unless you want the like the other part of the business to be completely private, like you know what I'm saying, like the what we working on. Some people like don't like they face to be in the business, and some people, you know, they don't mind their face being in the business. All really depends. But
People that do podcasts, they do them every day.
uh depends. I know a couple millionaires that came from my city, they all heads. And they do podcasts with like young popping people today. And they don't do it every day. They do it every time they get a guest. So every time they get a guest, that's when they sit down and do it. But they're not just talking just to talk. But every time they get a special guest, it draws the viewers in. So with you, that's almost like every time you got a story to tell, you're gonna come on there. And it's not like you doing it for like 11 hours a day like I was doing it. You be doing it for 1 hour.
Yeah, well, if I'm gonna really put it up, maybe chop these into short video, 2-3 minute video segments, and each 2 or 3 minute would have a number on it. So and have it so if somebody click on my stuff like on YouTube or whatever, give you a whole bunch of numbers, and they can click on number 1, number 20, number 30. I don't know if we can do that or not.
Yeah, we can. We can do anything essentially. I actually have, oh, and I know a website that I use till this day to what it's called clip farming. So basically, it could take an hour, 30 minute, 2 hour, however long video, and they could cut it up automatically using the AI, and it'll label it with numbers, and it'll put captions under it.
Hmm.
So it'll do all this automatically. All you gotta do is click 3 buttons. File, upload, choose how you wanna edit it, and it'll do the rest. And that's how I get my videos. And it's pretty cheap. It's affordable. Like with my streaming career, I use it every time. I don't ever not want to use it. And it'll create out of 20 minutes. It'll create 30 videos you can pick from. And it'll rank the ones that'll trend. That's the craziest part about it. It's called clip something. Opus Clip. The #1 AI tool. It really works. It definitely works. Speaking of which, bro.
We don't need to. Man, help me lift this table so we can flip it around. Put the wall at your back.
Alright, bet. Yeah, we're gonna dang near have to unplug everything. That's the only thing.
Oh no, we can we'll do it later.
Word. We even got the app. So basically, this was me back in Philly. I would just have these talking points, and like they basically rank the videos. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if it's gonna load, but you can get it through the app or you could do it through the computer. But
Honestly, like we all just starving, and we all probably like everybody wants to know, can he actually make it? Like everybody wants to see this. I even want to see this myself. I put so much expectation in myself that it's like this is impossible odds that I'm facing, and I love it because I'm a performance based guy. I tell you what I'm gonna give you, and then I'm gonna give you exactly that. You dig what I'm saying? I put the pedestal on for myself so high. See that background, yeah? Honestly, like I know
yeah,
I'm just why we didn't have to face the wall. I can walk out of there with. Like everybody wants
right.
to
You don't want
know,
to see the background.
can he actually make it? Like
If I walk out with
my underwear or something on, you know?
Oh yeah. Or if you walk out here with a shorty or something, you don't want them to see that. Yeah, I got you. I got you, Doc. I got you. Yeah, we could definitely do that tomorrow. Have it like facing that way. A lot of editing to do. So you said you got like several doctor's office? Like you said you got like 7 offices? So when you work, do you work like you got 3? So when you work, how many hours you work?
Oh, not many. Probably like 10.
Like 10?
All right, I'm ready to do one, man.
You want to come on? I bet, come on. Euro. Spider-Man, Spider-Man does whatever a Spider Kid does. him mic up. I like this mic though. I ain't gonna lie, like mic'd up. Introducing my guy. Special introduction before you hop on Cam.
See what I want to do first.
Okay, good afternoon, class. So this will be our last class before the break. We have a 3-week break coming up. I hope that during these 3 weeks you have a chance to reflect on what we've learned, because when we come back, we'll continue to build on the ideas that we've learned so far. And so today, I want to talk about the meritocracy. The meritocracy means that people should succeed based on their talent, their ability, and their hard work. And in theory, this sounds like a good idea. And in fact, the school system is built around the idea of a meritocracy. The good students go to the best universities, and then after they graduate, they will get the very best jobs. Lots of problems with the meritocracy. And what I'll also show you is that, in fact, this idea...
I was testing the speakers, but this is... Okay. I bet.
Google Career Certificates teach you skills that are actually in demand.
I learned the importance of a project scope,
Alright, can I give you a crazy introduction, at least for the video, though? Alright, I got you. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, today here we have a very special guest. You know, this man has helped a lot of people in his lifetime. He does a lot of great work for his community, and, you know, oftentimes doesn't get the recognition, you know. A very unsung hero, if you will, you know. And he has a story to tell. Great guy, you know, helped a lot of people. I just want y'all to understand, in this lifetime, you know, all heroes don't wear capes, you know what I'm saying? But we got one today. So I got you. So as y'all will listen to this man, hear his story, and, you know, get to know him, personality, and just listen. We got a life left in us. Let's enjoy. So without a further ado, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, put your caps and gowns on. Doc, come on out for us, man. Let's go. What's going on, man?
How's everybody? How's everybody doing? Yeah, I am Dr. James Pridgeon.
Yep, there you go.
Okay, yeah, clip that on. I just wanted to start talking a little bit about my life experiences, where I grew up, all sorts of things. There are going to be a lot of things that are kind of funny, things that have happened to me throughout my career. There are going to be a lot of happy times, or happy stories. There are going to be some sad stories, a lot of patient stories. But to start out with, I grew up in Columbus County, North Carolina. Went to North Carolina. Well, most people know it as NCCU, North Carolina Central University, right? HBCU. All right, then I went from there and went to medical school at Wake Forest. Came out of Wake Forest and did an internal medicine internship and residency in Wilmington, North Carolina. And since then, I've been practicing in Columbus County, New Hanover County, and a couple of surrounding counties. So as you might imagine, after 41 years of doing this, have a lot of interesting stories to tell. And my buddies have been trying to convince me to tell these stories for a couple of decades now. So since I met Corinthian here, he's inspired me to kind of get started with some of these stories. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna see if we can kind of number them as we go along. And so if you want to refer back to some of them, you know, you can. So let's start out with something pretty interesting. As I was growing up as a small child, of course, I grew up on a small farm, and we were in the fields, tobacco fields mostly. And I recall those days when people would ask me what I was going to do when I graduated high school. And I looked at them like they were crazy. I said, I'm going to do something that gets me out of these fields. You know, I was tired of the tobacco worms and the snakes, right? And the 105-degree temperatures and tobacco, rows of tobacco that were so long till you couldn't even see the end of them. So, of course, I was going to do something. Then, of course, my mom, it was pretty inspirational. She didn't know that she was inspirational, but one time in particular, the faucet in the bathtub was leaking. And I said, you know, one of these days I want to write a book called The Leaky Faucet. because that was pretty interesting. The faucet was leaking, and so my mom went to the hardware store, and she bought a brand new faucet for the bathtub. And she looks at me and says, "Boy, put this faucet on." I looked at her like she was crazy. I said, "I don't know how to put a faucet on." She said, "You either put this faucet on, or I'm gonna whoop your ass." And so I remember struggling trying to get this thing put on, and I was just crying and crying. So finally the thing broke loose, and I was able to put the faucet on, and I turned the water on, and it worked. And I ran and got my mother, and she came in. I turned the faucet on and showed her that it had worked, and she said, "I knew you could do it." And since that moment, there were a lot of things that seemed impossible to others. For some reason, I knew I could do it. So it sort of started from there. Now, my dad also gave me a real good lesson. He used to tell us this story, and I'm sure many of you have heard the story about the frog and the scorpion. You know, the frog was sitting by the side of the pond, and the scorpion needed to get across the pond. So the scorpion said, "Mr. Frog, can I ride your back across the pond?" And the frog said, "You must think I'm crazy." Said, "If you get on my back, you're gonna sting me." And the scorpion said, "Why would I do that? If I sting you, then you would die, and I can't swim, so that means both of us are gonna die." And the frog said, "You got a point there." So we say, "Hop on." So the scorpion hopped on the frog's back, and he got in the middle of the pond, and the scorpion stung the frog. And as the frog was dying, he said, "Why would you do that?" He said, "Now both of us are gonna die." And the scorpion said, "Just being true to my nature, I guess." See, so that was a very valuable story to me, because that let me know that you're going to meet all kinds of people in this life, right? But the one thing that you want to determine is what that person's true nature is. A person who has a very good nature, or who is a good person, that person can make mistakes, right? You overlook them. But then on the other side of the coin, if a person is not a good person and they do a couple of good deeds, you have to overlook them as well, because that person is not a good person. So those are a couple of stories that really just resonated with me, and kind of built part of the foundation of how I treat people, and how I expect to be treated. So.
Okay. Nah, that was good. I ain't gonna lie. She was really gonna whip your ass though.
Yep. She was real good at that. You know. In fact, there was a time when she would get up early in the morning, about 5 o'clock in the morning. She would go out to the field, chop the weeds from around the corn and all of that. And she would say, "Boys," of course I have a twin brother, said, "Boys, come on outside. Get out of that bed, come outside." So we would get up and we would get completely dressed, but then we would get back in the bed. And then, so a little while later, we would hear her coming through the back door with one of her, what's called a switch. Some of you may not know what that is, but
a switch.
Yeah, where you tear a small branch off of a tree.
Oh, a branch.
And you use that to whip your kids with. When I was growing up, so we would hear her dragging the switch through the house, and of course we were already completely dressed, and so she would get just about to the bedroom. And we had already put the window up, and we would dive out of the window and run down to the field, right? So one morning, we heard her coming through the house. So she got just about to the bedroom, and I dove out of the window and hit my knee on the windowsill, right? And I was on the ground just writhing in pain. And she came outside with the switch, and she looked down at me and started laughing and started whipping my ass. She was a no nonsense type of person, I tell you. So that was my mom, but I can tell you a lot of stories about her. But so that's another story. But I have a lot of stories. One is about my twin brother. He was a real interesting character. He used to have this dog that was on a chain, and the dog had worms. Never will forget this. The dog had worms, so we went and got some worm medicine, and the medicine said 1 capful per gallon of water, right? So he did it, put 1 capful in a gallon of water. The dog drank the water. The next day he went outside and there were a lot of worms on the ground. And he said, if 1 capful worked that well, he poured the whole thing in there. And the dog drank it. The next day the dog was dead. I said, man, what kind of logic was that?
So the water had worms in it.
No, the dog had worms in the dog. The water with the worm medicine caused the worms to come out of the dog.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So, but he figured since 1 capful worked that well, the whole bottle ought to work 10 times as well, and it killed the dog.
What Mama Bear say about it?
She just kind of shook her head, and knowing that the boy just did not make the right decision at that time. But so anyway, those were some childhood stories, and I may relate some more at future times. But let's move on to some of my experiences as a physician here in North Carolina. As I said, I've been doing it for 41 years. At one time, I owned 7 offices. Have had about 500,000 patient visits in the last 41 years.
500,000.
So that's quite a bit of experience, and so we can get started on some of those stories.
Okay. Got you.
All right, we can cut it off now. So
I say no more. Yo, that was actually pretty good, Doc.
Well, shoot, man, I just kind of messing around, jumping around, but I gotta figure out what stories. I got so many of them, bro. I got so many stories. Let's see. So it's off now, right?
Yeah.
All right. Let me see. Let me see one of my stories. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's go and turn it back on.
All right, but I got you.
All right. One of my first stories is back in the late 80s. I was working in the emergency room, and a lady came in complaining of some vaginal itching. So we had to do an exam, and so when I went to do the exam, all kind of crusty stuff started falling out, and before I knew it, it just came off the top of my head without me even knowing what I was going to say. Before I knew it, I said, "When's the last time you washed your ass?" And the lady said, "I wash my ass every day, thank you." I said, "I don't know whose ass you washed, but it wasn't yours." So, of course, that was unplanned, and the lady was not too happy about that. But I'm just telling you the real deal. It was so. A few minutes later, when the emergency room doors open, a little snake comes into the emergency room, and the nurses went out to try to deal with that and left me and this woman in the main part of the emergency room by ourselves. Of course, I thought that she was going to kill me before they got back. So it's a good thing that they got back in time, because this lady was not too happy.
So they left. So somehow a snake got in there, like in the part y'all was at. It got in there.
Yeah, and of course, I'm terrified of snakes. But that's just one story. Now, let me tell you another interesting one.
So wait, hold on, Doc. So what happened after the snake? So like you and her were just in a room and the snake was just there.
We were in the main part of the emergency room, and the snake had just come through the doors. So, the couple of nurses ran out to get this thing out. And when they ran out, then it was the lady and myself sitting there, and the lady was kind of glaring at me like she wanted to kill me. So I was just waiting for somebody else to come back in. So
Did you jump out that window?
probably should have. But there is another story that, of course, like I said, there's got a lot of them, but one that's real interesting is I had a 17-year-old boy come into the emergency room. His heart was beating, about 240 times a minute. He had just been taking some cocaine. And around that same time, I had read an article saying that if you shock a person with the paddles, and usually if somebody stops breathing, the heart stops. You start out at what's called 100 joules, which is units of energy. And you hit both buttons. You've seen it on television where you take the paddles, hit the paddles, and the person kind of flexes. So I charged this thing to 20 joules. At 20 joules, according to the article, the patient will not feel the electrical current, but the heart will, and it will reset the heart back to a normal rhythm. So I charged this thing to 20 joules. I put the paddles on the kid's chest, and right before I hit the button, the nurse came up behind me and said, this is not right. And she cranks it up to 100 joules. I hit those buttons, and this kid bounced in the air off that bed, and he said, "Oh!" I said, "Oh my God!" I look at the paddles. I look back at the monitor, and that's when I saw that she had turned this thing up to 100 joules. Oh my goodness! I thought I had killed that poor little boy, and so he finally calmed down. Of course, his rhythm went back to normal, and so he left the emergency room. Then a couple of days later, his mom came in and wanted to speak with me, and I said, "Uh-oh. I don't know what she's gonna say, but it can't be good." So, she came back and she looks at me and she says, "Thank you for what you did for my son." I said, "Huh?" She said, "Since he left here, said he won't touch cocaine, and after school he's out on the beach telling those young kids, if you're doing cocaine, you better stop it." So at least that ended up being something positive.
Yeah. Hey, maybe that's what he needed. All that pain and cocaine in the system, you just get it out of him, just like that.
Yeah. It was scary though. That's wow.
We could have lost them. We could have lost them by that many joules.
Well, usually not, but it's just painful. It's very painful. For that much energy to go into somebody who's awake, right? But then I'll tell you a funny story. Once again, I was in the emergency room, and there was a nurse there that was married to a guy that was in the military, and he was getting ready to be stationed elsewhere. So she was going to have to leave with her husband. So this was her last night on shift in the emergency room. So the tradition is that on a nurse's last night, you pull a prank on the nurse. So they had tried a few things and it didn't work. She saw right through it. So one of the nurses looked at the schedule and says, Dr. Pridgeon is going to be here. And say, he'll find something that will work. So I came in, they pulled me to the side and they told me what was going on. So I said, okay. So it just so happened that the head guy for the paramedics was in the emergency room, getting some coffee. So I go over and I talk to him, and he gets on his phone. He sets things up. So about 20 minutes later, the ambulance rolls up, and they have this guy that they pull off the ambulance with a sheet over him with a toe tag and all that. And the guy was found in a ditch with a rope around his neck. And so the nurse says, well, since it's my last night, I'll go ahead and take this, because they wanted to bring the guy through the emergency room to clean him up before he goes to the morgue so the family could view the body. So she put her gown and her gloves on, and she was back there getting prepared to clean the guy up. So they pulled the sheet back off the guy's face, and the guy sat up and said, "Hello."
They got her.
She started screaming. And she ran. She just started running down the hall, the long hall. By the time she got to the end of the hall, she stopped, and she turned around, and she walked back, and she said, "You got me. You got me." That was pretty crazy. So, you want to keep going?
Oh man, yeah, that's crazy, Doc. And mind you, back then, this was like how long ago?
Oh man,
In the 70s?
This was the late 80s.
Oh yeah, late 80s. You getting away with that? I feel like now in 2025, you do that, you losing your job.
Mm-hmm.
Give me your masters. Give me your license. Give me all that.
Yep.
It's strict around here, but in the 80s, they was having fun. That's that Grey's Anatomy. Some of y'all grew up on that. That was him. They was having fun back in the day. It wasn't like how it is today, boy.
Yeah. I'll also tell you, one of the lessons that I learned when I first got into my internship. I was assigned a patient that was in the intensive care unit. He was on a ventilator, had tubes going, in his heart and all of that. And so I was determined to be a star on rounds the next morning. So I actually stayed up all night long, writing orders, adjusting, oxygen levels, fluid levels, all kinds of things, giving medications, and to make sure all of the pressures, the blood pressure, the central venous pressure, Swan-Ganz readings, everything was right in the box. It took me all night to get everything perfect. And so at rounds that next morning, I hadn't had any sleep. And so we were on rounding on another patient, really. And then the intercom comes on and says, "Code Blue, intensive care unit." It was my patient, right? This guy died. So the lesson there was you can't treat the numbers. You can't treat the numbers. You got to treat the patient, right? All the numbers were in the box, right? Everything was perfect, and the patient died. So that was a huge lesson for me. In fact, I was a part of a physician panel in Columbus County where there were 4 physicians, including myself, and there was a crowd of people, and the physicians would get up and they would present their whatever they wanted to say about people's health and well-being, and then the audience would ask some questions. So the first guy got up, and he did pretty good. The second person got up, and I went, okay, I can accept that. The third person got up, and that wasn't good. Somebody in the audience asked, do you really have to take vitamins? And the doctor's response was no. All you got to do is eat different color foods every day, and you don't have to take vitamins. That was it for me. So when I got up, my first statement was, y'all getting ready to see why they don't invite me to these kind of things. And people chuckled a little bit. I say, first of all, I agree that if you eat different color foods and different types of food every day, that you will be healthier. But how many of us have the time to do that and to cook that much every day? In addition to that, just about everybody eats the same handful of vegetables their entire lives. So if you got deficiencies, then those deficiencies will be maintained because you're just eating the same things. Then there was another guy that said you need to just go to your doctor and get your labs run every year. Of course, my issue with that is that I got up and said, listen, I wouldn't give you 1/4 for most of the labs that I run. I say, consider this. I got a guy sitting on my table whose great-grandfather died at 50 years old of a heart attack. Right? His grandfather died at 50 years old of a heart attack. His father died at 50 years old of a heart attack. Now he comes in for a physical exam, and I run all the labs, I run the EKG, everything is completely perfect. And I come in the room and I say to him, oh, all your labs are great, everything is fine. And he's 49? No. This guy needs a full cardiac workup, So you just can't depend on the labs all the time. You got to practice medicine. I always tell people, if depending on the labs was the thing that you needed to do, then why would you have to go to medical school? You need to go anywhere and get your labs done and depend on what the labs say. It's absolutely not that simple, So that's another one.
Okay. See, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah. Now I'll tell you a funny story. This is one told to me by a physician who works in the emergency room in California, and he said in L.A. you got all kinds of crazy things that happen. He said he had a guy. I don't know if you guys have heard of something called gerbiling. Gerbiling is what these guys do, where they put a live gerbil up their rectum, and when the everything closes off, then the gerbil suffocates, and while he's suffocating, he's thrashing against the prostate, and that's what gives them their pleasure. This thing hitting against the prostate as it's dying. That's called gerbiling. And then so some guys do that, but then when they can't find a gerbil, then they'll put a vibrator up there. So he had a patient, he was telling me, that had put a vibrator up his rectum, and the thing slipped and went all the way in his rectum. So he had to come into the emergency room to get it out. So the doctor did an x-ray, and he came back to the exam room with the x-ray in hand, and he put the x-ray up, and he showed the guy that the vibrator was in a perfect position. So he asked the patient, said, sir, you want me to remove this thing or just change the batteries? So That was
crazy. Well, wait. Doc, I gotta ask you something. So when you hear about when you seen and witnessed all this, you didn't laugh? Like, do you just crack
Heck
up
yeah.
inside? Cause I'm not gonna lie, I would have been lost my license. Like a person come to me for a rectum problem, you left the vibrator up there. You trying to get it out, damn near.
Oh yeah. It was pretty interesting, but you know, we did a lot of crazy things. Like I was this guy came in for a laceration of the face, and I was sewing him up. Right, it took a little while, and you know he and I were talking and laughing and all that. So when I got to the last stitch, I was telling him something, and I stopped right in the middle of a word, and I said, "Oops." The guy said, "What do you mean, oops, man? What do you do? What you do?" I didn't do anything. I was just messing with him. But when you sitting there, you've been talking to the guy for 30 minutes, then all of a sudden you say, "Oops."
Right, the ball drop.
That's crazy. So anyway, that's just a few.
And what's the laceration? I never heard of that.
It's a cut. You know, when you get cut, they just call it a laceration. Yeah. So that's one of many stories. There was one of my favorite ones is a lady who was she was lying on the bed. She was probably mid to late 60s. Her husband was sitting by the bed with her, and her blood pressure was so high that the blood pressure cuff wouldn't read it. You know, blood pressure cuff went to 300, and at 300, her blood pressure was above 300, and so I'm standing there, trying to talk to her about the importance of taking her blood pressure medicines. Well, her husband said, "Doc, you're wasting your time." He says, "I can't tell you the number of people who've tried to talk to her about the importance of taking her blood pressure medicine, but she will not listen." So the lady raised her hand and she tapped me on the wrist and she said, "You don't have to worry." She said, "The Lord will provide." So I got real close to her and looked her straight in the eye and I said, "Who do you think sent me?" So her eyes popped open, and I passed her husband in the hall a couple of weeks later in the hospital, and I asked him how his wife was doing, and he said she's been taking her blood pressure medicine every day since you talked to her. So that was interesting. Yep.
And since then, like, you never seen her again?
No. Nope. So that was and there's another story. Once again, was working in the emergency room, and a guy, a white gentleman, ran through the door and had probably a 6-month-old baby in his arms. The baby was turning blue, and he ran through the door. "Help! Please help my baby!" So a couple of nurses and myself, rushed to the guy, and the guy looks up and he asked me, "Are you the doctor?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Ain't no black man gonna touch my baby." He said, "I'm taking my baby to the next hospital." And so we grabbed the baby from the guy, and we said, "Sir, this baby's not going anywhere." And so the guy left to get his gun. And so in the meantime, we revived the baby. The baby went from blue to started, turning pink, and then started crying. And about that time, the mom rushes through the doors, and screaming and crying. And once she sees that the baby was okay, then of course she's thanking us. But we had a lot of police officers outside of the hospital, outside the emergency room doors, waiting for this guy to come back with his gun. So the dilemma there is this: of course, we did not have permission to treat that baby. So if the baby had died, we would have been screwed. If we had let this guy leave with the baby would have died on the way to the next hospital. And all he had to say was, if they had let me know how serious the condition was, I would have never left. See, so then we would have been screwed. So that was kind of an ethical dilemma that we were kind of lucky. Of course, the baby was extremely lucky, but we were lucky that it turned out okay, because that's one of those split-second situations where you just got to make a decision.
So whatever happened to the guy? He ain't come back?
No, he probably attempted to, but saw the cops out there, and so he that was the end of that. But that was a real interesting ethical dilemma that we had to, like I said. So that's just a few.
Nah, them stories, Doc. Appreciate you. That's more life. They don't really get to hear this side of it. They don't know this. They don't know all this, what you've been through, your life stories. It's so lively. Like, people really don't get to hear this. We appreciate you, Doc.
Yeah. Well, we will tell some more in the near future, because there are a lot of experiences, a lot of interesting things have happened. All right.
Appreciate you, Doc.
So,
my man.
so,
Let me grab this mic off you. Man, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Doc. Give it up for Doc. That's the man around town, man. He played off, but he's the man. Like, I'm trying to tell you, he really the man. You know what I'm saying? He's humble. Very humble. Got you. Man, how y'all feeling though? I ain't talked to y'all in a minute. We ain't have our one-on-one since I seen y'all seen me back in Philly. It's the craziest part about it. Yeah, let me end this real quick.